This is session 6A, so welcome everybody. The theme of this session is sustainability and the built environment. I'm Lloyd Scott, and I'm delighted to be with you chairing this session. And we're approximately going to be an hour duration in this session, and we have 3 papers to present. I propose that we actually do paper by paper and then take questions on each paper. I'll run the papers in the order that we have them presented here. So the first paper is Energy Efficient Behavioural Trends in Residential Sectors for Low-Income Cultural Backgrounds, a case study of slums in Chittagong in Bangladesh. And Mohammad Uddin is the lead author on that. So I'm actually going to run the video now. And what I would ask you to do is if people have questions, they can post them.
Good evening to all.
In the chat area.
Mohammad Uddin, a full-time PhD student from the Department of Building and Real Estate, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Today I'm going to present my research topics, energy efficient behavioral trends in residential sector for low-income cultural background, a case study of slums in Chittagong, Bangladesh. These are the outline of my presentation, introduction and background, and then I will describe study aim and objective, methodology, result and discussion, research contribution to body of knowledge, and next conclusion and limitation. First, I'm going to describe about the background of this research, why energy behavior research or behavior trend research is important, because technology alone is not sufficient or suitable to make low energy building, and human behavior play an important role to save around 5 to 30% energy savings. However, occupant behavior is completely complex because stochastic diversity or multidisciplinary and sensing occupant behavior data is challenging. These are the diagrams showing the building performance system, which is mainly considered stochastic or constant behavior pattern, but realistic behavior is completely random or stochastic. These are some influential parameters of occupant energy behavior study. These are directly indirectly linked with the human behavior, like climate, personal, building or design feature, economic regulation, socio-cultural, arrival, departure, and activity type. These are my study area. These are the Chittagong or Chittagong, which is located in the southeastern part of Bangladesh. This area around 2,510 square kilometer and its people around 2.59 million. The main problem is the urban and unplanned urbanization in this city makes it difficult to living for the low income or slum people. These are the general condition or general statistics of the current urban slum system in Chittagong City. Chittagong City slum people, around 1/4 of the city's people live in the worst affected area in this, in terms of quality of service and energy facilities. People are coming from the village or rural area in the city for their livelihood. However, there are very poor health and power, energy or water sanitation system, which make it problematic in this city area, and which is normally make another challenging for make a sustainable development in this city. These are some common various findings from the current literature, which is make it difficult for make urban people to access safer, cleaner and legal source of energy, such as lack of education, empowering communities, lack of trust between the service provider and communities, lack of infrastructure, lack of NGOs involvement in housing and efficient issues, and lack of information available for the slum people also. And urban poor people may generally pay the 3 times more tariff than the regular price. There are several contextual factors. These are already described in the previous research. So in this study, we mainly consider 2 types of social contextual factors. income and household structure. So in this case, we consider 54 slum dwellers, and we also collected energy bill, income level, and finally we analyzed using this data using two-way ANOVA analysis. These are the study aim and objective mainly to identify existing energy consumption pattern for selected slum dwellers, and to implement a peer feedback program or energy saving awareness system in terms of intervention among the selected dwellers. And finally, we identify the statistically simple findings by considering the social contextual factor. These are the overall research methods which we have followed. First, we selected study area. There is some questionnaire for the targeted slum dwellers, and then we employed energy saving and another feedback program. Also, we collected energy data collection for before and after intervention, and we analyzed the data using an analysis system, analysis, and then we find resultant discussions. These are the three types of housing we consider: type 1, type 2, and type 3. These are some descriptive data we have considered in this study: type 1, type 2, and type 3 housing, and their income level range also. 3 income level is BDT 5,000 to 7,000, BDT 7,000 to 9,000, and BDT greater than 9,000. These are some comparison between the variable after and before intervention. Let's see, for energy consumption before and after intervention, find a significant findings, whereas p-value is less than 0.05, which is indicate a statistically significant findings. However, energy consumption of housing type 1, type 2, and type 3, energy consumption income low versus moderate versus high, and energy consumption housing and income have been shown there are no findings, no statistically significant findings. Also, another variable, housing type 1, type 2, and type 3 income level and housing income also don't show any type of statistically significant finding. These are the overall scenario of energy consumption pattern before and after intervention. We've seen in some point type 2 or type 3 housing, they shows there are huge or considerable amount significant energy savings compared to type 1. But however, after some period of times, it will convert it will follow the first rules or first energy consumption pattern, which is mainly due to the rebound effect. So this features mainly contribute a behavior waves for the slum people. We have identified the relationship between the slum people and energy consumption patterns.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Hamad, for your presentation. It's a really, really interesting case study, and just interesting from the point of view of, in terms of, people's attitudes to energy efficient behaviours and trends. I'm going to open it up to the floor for people to ask questions. Has anybody any questions in the chat? We can actually, if people want to ask questions, please, by all means, drop those questions into the chat.
We've got no questions in the chat. I just because we had a pause, I actually missed the intervention. So it'd be nice. I obviously I saw most of the other part of the presentation, but what was the actual intervention again, Uddin? Is he able to respond? Can we?
He is. Yep. I think his connection isn't great.
Oh, okay. So he can't speak live.
I think he did speak earlier. So
see where he is.
I'll just give him permission again. Okay. So maybe Chris, could you repeat?
Yeah, sorry, I missed the. So unfortunately, with this problem where I can see that everything else is running, but the video stopped. So I actually missed what your interventions were. And I do recount reviewing this paper. So, but can you remind me what the interventions were?
Sorry, could you please repeat again?
Can you remind me what the interventions were for the slum areas?
Oh, which type intervention? Here I used mainly intervention is knowledge based. We have provided some energy efficiency saving measures information by leaflet, using some leaflet, like if you save more energy, then it will save your money also. And also another issue, we have encourage people to use energy conservation measure for their home and apartment for future energy savings also. So first, we have provided some oral communication with the audience, with the what we call our selected group of people. Here we have selected three types of people based on housing structure and economy. Okay, so mainly leaflet based, we used some for intervention, and after 1 month we calculated energy consumption data from their energy meter.
It seems like almost the group that used the least amount of energy were the ones that actually responded to the questionnaire. Is that right?
Yeah, some questionnaire also involved here. Questionnaire as well as some oral communication, also like a feedback program.
Oh, I've lost audio there. I see. We've got another question, but I've lost audio. Can you hear
Mohammad? Yeah, I can hear. I can hear you, Chris. Mohammad, yes, I think we've lost Mohammad.
Yeah. I am hearing.
Okay.
Maybe wait till after the next presentation. But we have got there's another question on in the chat.
Methodological approach, yeah. So Mohammad, I'm not sure if you could see Mahid's question in the chat. Have you investigated behavior through questionnaire, survey, or interview? And what do you think about the ethnographic approach for this type of research?
What do you think for this type of research? Yeah, of course, I used actually both. This is mixed type.
Okay, mixed methods.
Mixed method. And what about ethnographical approach means I consider these things here. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you might get different findings if you were to actually?
Yeah, of course. This is also some advanced research. I think ethnographical approach also suitable in this case. So we have identified the more inherent and interrelated data identification. Anthropological approach is required, but here we used mainly a simple mixed method survey, and both are included here.
Okay, great. Hida, I hope you're happy with Mohammed's response there. Okay.
Sponsor.
His answer, sorry, his response. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll move on. So thank you for your contribution, Mohammad.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm extremely sorry for the internet connection.
No, I can understand the internet connection. Yeah, it's actually poor. So we'll move to the next paper, which is a paper entitled Value Integration Through Social Innovation in Blue-Green Infrastructure Projects. And our presenter is Lizet Kuitert. Okay. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Lizet Kuitert and I work at the Department of Public Administration and Sociology at Erasmus University Rotterdam. I will present the paper entitled Value Integration Through Social Innovation in Blue-Green Infrastructure Projects, which is co-authored by Willems from the University of Amsterdam and Professor Leentje Volker from the University of Twente. The work presented in this paper is part of the Interreg North Sea Region Begin project. The project is a unique partnership in which 10 cities and 6 research institutes combine forces to develop blue and green infrastructure solutions through social innovation and exchange experiences. BTIs are nature-based solutions such as green roofs, water squares or rain gardens that aim to make cities more climate resistant. Social innovation has 3 components. First, new combinations. These combinations for blue and green infrastructure relate to the multifunctional nature, which brings goals from different policy areas together. BTI offers not only urban water management values, but can also lead to increased property value, health and well-being, and biodiversity. In this way, technical and physical objectives can work as a lever for social objectives. Second, cutting across boundaries. The involvement of different interests, knowledge, expertise, and drivers are fragmented and dispersed among stakeholders. Therefore, organizational and disciplinary boundaries have to be crossed. Moreover, BTI depends on land use and has to be integrated into urban design and planning. Third, compelling new relationships. The multiple benefits of BTI will often require and result in co-production and collaboration between governments at all levels, local residents, developers, private landowners, and others, that require a shift away from more traditional hierarchical approaches by governments. Especially in the domain of climate adaptation, interdependencies between actors are growing, and new collaborations between public, private, and societal stakeholders have been developed to integrate the multidimensional issues of climate adaptation. The urgency to construct BTI is growing because climate change and urbanization impact the resilience of our cities. Think about the current local floods in the Netherlands, Germany, and India. And cities are also increasingly experiencing a loss of biodiversity, feel the urgency of addressing heat stress, and experience periods of drought, and want to promote citizens' health and well-being. In this paper, we focus on the first element of social innovation, new combinations or value integration, in the development of BTIs. Yet, value integration in BTI projects has proven to be difficult. Social innovation is seen as a promising form explored by local governments for better value integration. Social innovation combines technical, social, and economic objectives through which governments strive to achieve broader goals for both public and private parties. It refers to new approaches for dealing with social challenges that come about through networks and joint action in social domains, outside the systemic world of government and the business logic of corporate industry. There is no real consensus of what value integration actually is and how it is achieved. This has contributed to the limited success of integration strategies. We know quite a lot about top-down bureaucratic innovation to strive for integration of multiple goals, such as policy integration. But because we lack knowledge about different ways to organizing value integration in the context of social innovation, this paper aims to understand how the multiple values of blue and green infrastructure projects can be captured and sustained in the process of social innovation. Blue and green infrastructure is usually a responsibility of the domain of urban water management at the local government level. A pitfall is, however, that wider benefits of PGI are often added as an additional goal to existing ambitions and then, to some extent, lost to other goals such as financial feasibility and construction goals. For example, the employment of local youth in green space management may be hampered by strict social return regulations. Most often, true value integration in which added value gets achieved is not happening. Added value is only achieved when the integration of values leads to enhanced value for each objective within the integration. One reason for this is that new approaches are at odds with established bureaucratic norms and practices, leading to trade-offs between values instead of balancing or integrating values. Existing management approaches such as contractual mechanisms create hard boundaries to limit risk, and thus offer little room for new values that require greater cooperation. So despite their often commendable intentions, governments continue to struggle to distance themselves from old rational technical approaches to value decision-making and adopt approaches that do justice to the dynamic interest of the entire network and contribute to the larger system. This has implications for the spectrum of value integration, ranging from alignment to true integration. Value integration today is often strived for through policy integration. The question remains whether integration is only a strategic concept, or whether it can also take place operationally, tactically, or even between individuals within a firm. We consider policy integration as an activity taking place at the strategic decision-making level, and has to find a way through the organization and the project network. Value integration as social innovation, in contrast, can occur at different levels. Social innovation may start either top-down or bottom-up, either within the organization or in a network, and strives to ensure that value integration being pursued is picked up by the organization and is mainstreamed throughout the organization. Social innovation may be seen as a counterpart to bureaucratic innovation, but may not be possible without some form of policy integration. Looking at pathways to value integration, we incorporate the process of pursuit. We therefore adopt a dynamic relational perspective in order to take into account the value dynamics present in social innovation. More static approaches to value management are deliberate or purposeful, as opposed to emerging. To analyze which value integration approaches are used in social innovation processes, we performed an exploratory comparative case study of 4 blue and green infrastructure projects in different cities of 3 different European countries. In total, we conducted 24 semi-structured interviews with various public and societal stakeholders. To explore the different value integration pathways, we looked into what happened with both climate adoption goals and wider societal goals when delivering the multifunctional PGI projects through social innovation. Looking at the impact and degree of value integration of different arrangements, in each of the 4 cases, it became clear that despite the aim of value integration, one value or goal remained to be leading. We found that when the main goal comes from the technical department, acting as the owner or as asset manager of the water task, the management approach was more often traditional mono-value oriented. Alternatively, when the social perspective was leading, for example by creating a climate awareness, the pursuit of common goals was more natural and a broader view was often taken. An intermediate form of impact on value integration was seen when the climate goals were strived for with a spatial department in the lead. Our analysis demonstrated that local authorities are experimenting with different ways of integrating value by utilizing the emerging, distributed and institutionally hybrid features of social innovation in different ways. We inductively identified 4 ways of value integration in the PGI projects. which we call a materialistic, human, organizational and processual arrangement. An example of an organizational approach is the use of programs. Programs cross multiple policy domains. An example of a materialistic approach is the lending of garden tools, for example, to stimulate social housing residents to green their gardens, a municipality provided small trees and a local social organization provided garden tools. This also has to do with the financial situation of residents. They would never spend their money on tools, but were motivated to have a better outdoor space. We saw that overall social innovation opens up new ways of value integration in addition to already established top-down bureaucratic ways. These value integration arrangements, however, seem to mainly lead to increased alignment of different functionalities rather than true value integration. Thus, integration does not always mean added value for a city because the wider benefits seem often considered to be add-ons. They are often added to BGI project as an additional goal to existing ambitions and then to some extent lost to other goals. We currently aim to work towards a framework to categorize value integration pathways, improving our knowledge about the factors that influence value integration. We do this by studying different cases.
Okay. You're on mute, Chris.
Hi, sorry, I thought you'd lost connection.
No, I was just unmuting and releasing my camera. Thanks for that, Chris. Thank you, Lizet, for your paper and your presentation. I'd welcome people to post questions in the chat, and we can allow you then entry. So,
We've got a question.
Yeah, Jai Feng.
Thank you for the presentation. What are the values in the context of BDI? If the values differ from project to project, will your pathways change accordingly?
Okay, thanks, Chris. Lizet, have you?
Oh, we had a, it's gone.
Hiya.
Sorry.
No problem at all.
I think I heard the question, but I'm not sure. I think it was about which values were there in the BGI projects and whether or not the different values determined the process or the integration level.
Yeah.
That's what. Well, overall in BGI projects, climate adaptation values are in the lead. And if you strive for value integration through social innovation, then also social objectives are in the lead. So in the projects we studied, we looked into water management values, but also social values and values like biodiversity and the use of urban spaces such as recreation. And actually one of the findings has to do with what it means or what the effect is of these values on the social innovation and value integration processes. Because what we saw that when different departments are in the lead of striving for these BGI projects, so most often the water management department is in the lead, but for some projects we saw that, for example, the spatial department was in the lead, or even a completely new program was set up. And then we saw different outcomes. So what I presented is when the technical departments, which we connected to the water and sewage systems, were in the lead, then the value integration was not really there. It was only added on. when the physical department was in the lead, then we saw that, for example, values like biodiversity were adopted more easily. And when the social department was already involved in the beginning, then there was way more discussion in front. So then the space was there to try at least to integrate, but somehow during the process they were not really successful. But at least the aim was there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Lizet. I'll just open up the forum to Stephen. Stephen, would you like to pose your question?
Thanks, Lloyd. No, that's why I put it in the chat.
Okay, well, if you'd like me to read it, I can read it.
No. Sorry, of course I will. Because Lizet's presentation, it has reinforced something that I came up yesterday for me and this morning, which is that so much of what we're talking about here is client dependent. In terms of the contractors and even the designers, we're limited by what the client wants and is prepared to pay for. And so many of the solutions to the problems that we've been talking about are really out of our hands, and they're with the client. Lizet's, some of our clients are private, obviously. In Lizet's case, it's a public client, but we're missing the influence of and what in my question, what I expressed was my frustration that in Northern Ireland anyway, our public sector is not very creative or innovative when it comes to anything to do with social integration, social impact, I don't think. And I think that's true for the wider UK. And I see in a lot of countries, perhaps especially European countries, that there's just an awful lot more ability for the public sector to spend money with a longer term good, public good in mind. And it frustrates me that we can't influence that as an industry. So my question, it's not really a serious question, but I did want to end with a question. So it's not just me giving a comment, which is what can we do as an industry? How can we better influence clients, maybe particularly public sector clients, to take sustainability and public good and social impact much more seriously?
I'm not sure if my limited research is able to answer this question. It's an interesting question. I think one of the things you say is that also with the longer term, I think that sort of, I found that really interesting, because I think in the cases we see, also this longer term development is sort of the problem, because the social and also the sustainability values are of course more long term, but the values that they are traded off with are shorter term. So there is often quite a lot of miscommunication about the values and the time spent on realizing this values. So I also think that the way we assess projects needs to change somehow. And an interesting development I'm studying right now is, which is also done in one of the cities that one of the projects I research, is a programmatic approach in which they try to develop a map in which every domain can fill in their values, their projects, their aims, and everything. And they try to discuss this whenever a project is being pursued in an area. Then they will take the map and discuss what's going on, not only now, but also maybe in 5 years, and try to sort of align these projects with each other. But this is a development which we see in the Netherlands just beginning to start, and they're trying to figure out ways to align these timeframes. And I think that's one of the most important things to do. Okay. That's a limited answer to this very difficult question.
Okay. Thank you, Lizet. Are you okay with that?
That's a really good answer. That's part of the secret is how the projects are appraised, And this trade-off between long-term and short-term, certainly where you've got local authorities which are voted in on a short-term basis, then it's very difficult for the political level to take long-term view. So maybe the secret is more about this appraisal and how that value calculation is done. I mean, I know it's been there are tools, and it has, you know, it's not something we have just noticed today, but that's very insightful actually as an answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Colin Booth has a question, Lizet. How does social innovation marry with the engineering necessity of BGI?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's the what we're trying to figure out in the whole project. Yeah, it's quite difficult, but the idea is that not only the technical question is being answered, but also in combination with the physical and social questions that are apparent in an area. And the integration is one of the elements of social innovation, and that's which I have been looking at. But beforehand, we also looked at what social innovation is, and then it's really about crossing the boundaries internally, so in the client organization, but also creating a network in an area. So that's how it ties with the technical question, because they are trying to make or set up a new collaboration in which a wider view is taken. But that's the difficult part.
Okay, I think Colin is writing a response to you here as we speak. That maybe if I release the shackles, I'll let him in.
I can't really follow the chat. Oh, I missed a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I know it's hard to actually get to everything in terms, particularly when you're under pressure presenting. Yeah. So, Colin, do you want to reply to Lizet in terms of her response to your question?
I saw some movement, but I didn't hear anything.
No, I didn't hear anything either. Maybe the Gloucester area region has busy traffic in the afternoon in terms of connectivity.
It does look like the broad width is slowing up a little bit.
It does, yeah.
Maybe Colin will join us after the next presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to the next presentation. This is a nice segue in there, Chris, so thank you for that. The next presentation is from Danielle Gillespie and Stephen McIlwain from Queen's University, Belfast. And the title of their presentation on the paper is Reducing Embodied Carbon in the Construction Sector. So I'll switch to presentation mode.
My name is Danielle Gillespie, and I would like to introduce my paper with Dr. Stephen McIlwain on reducing embodied carbon in the construction sector. Firstly, why is there a drive for net zero carbon? In the UK, buildings generate as much as 49% of total UK greenhouse gas emissions. Following commitments made at the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement, the UK government has set a target to achieve net zero carbon emissions in the UK by 2050. Some groups propose that all new buildings designed from 2025 and all new buildings constructed by 2030 onwards should be net zero carbon. But the government's announcement adds a policy impetus and has the effect of putting real pressure on the construction industry to reduce carbon emissions. The increasing drive towards net zero carbon has thrown a spotlight on embodied carbon in the construction industry. So what is embodied carbon? Whole life carbon consists of two parts: operational carbon and embodied carbon. 71% of building-related emissions are generated by heating, cooling, supply power and other in-use activities. These are operational emissions. The remaining 29% are generated in the production and supply of the materials used in the building, known as embodied emissions. Embodied carbon includes emissions arising from the resource extraction, material production, transport, installation, maintenance, and end-of-life disposal. Why is embodied carbon important? Embodied carbon associated with the new construction in the UK accounts for 20% of annual carbon emissions. Embodied carbon now represents a larger percentage of whole life carbon emissions. Reducing this is key to meeting the UK's commitment to achieving net zero by 2050. For almost 45 years, the construction industry has targeted reducing energy use in buildings. However, until recently, embodied emissions were largely disregarded, and embodied carbon continues to be under-considered by designers. As buildings have become more energy efficient, the opportunities to further reduce operational carbon have reduced, and embodied carbon now represents a higher percentage of the whole life carbon emissions. This growing impetus to reduce emissions further means increased focus on embodied carbon. The aim of this study is to examine how embodied carbon is currently taken into account in construction projects in the UK and clarify what information and tools are available to calculate the embodied carbon content. It then identifies the steps needed to more effectively reduce embodied carbon in the construction sector. The approach. Academic and industry literature on carbon, embodied carbon and material carbon content was reviewed. Information was obtained from publicly available information on several recent projects on how embodied carbon was approached during design and material selection. A series of interviews were then held with 9 industry-leading professionals familiar with the topic of embodied carbon and practical experience in considering it in building refurbishment and new building design. The 9 interviews included an architect, a mechanical and electrical director, a mechanical and electrical engineering associate, a structural engineering director, a client's senior project manager, a building developer, the client's building manager, and the main contractor's project director and design manager. Thematic analysis with the aid of the in vivo software tool was used to analyse and explore patterns in the data, and which allowed in-depth analysis of the interview transcripts. Several organisations have produced guidance on addressing embodied carbon. The European Committee for Standardisation, also known as the CEN, has provided guidance. In 2017, RICS produced its whole life carbon assessment for the built environment, which was the first guidance in the UK on a whole life carbon approach to reducing emissions. Also in 2017, RIBA published its embodied and whole life carbon assessment to provide guidance specifically for architects on reducing carbon emissions by considering whole life carbon during design. The Institution of Structural Engineers and the Chartered Institute of Building, also known as CIOB, also published guidance. The London Energy Transformation Initiative, established in 2017, produced guidance for industry in progressing towards net zero carbon, focusing specifically on the London area, with their recommendations being incorporated into the Greater London Authority. LETI has pushed for embodied carbon to become part of legislation to achieve net zero carbon. Databases and tools for calculating embodied carbon. The Inventory of Carbon and Energy, also known as ICE for short, was created to compile data on embodied carbon from both primary and secondary public sources. Although this is widely used, Sturgis carbon profiling has been analysing material carbon emissions since 2007 and considers that many challenges remain in assessing embodied carbon, not least that there was still not one comprehensive database that industry can use as a data source on embodied carbon in materials. More recently, architects Hawkins Brown and engineers Untitled Chapter have developed their own emission reduction tools, which are Revit-based. These measure the volume of each material within the digital model and applies data on the embodied carbon content to each. Both use the data from the ICE database while also allowing the input of other data, which is key for enabling a meaningful comparison between construction projects. Although the progressive tools developed by Hawkins Brown and Untitled Chapter highlight how architects and engineers are reacting to the need for an embodied carbon tool, there is still the opportunity for inconsistencies without one tool that is used industry-wide. This raises the question if there could ever be one tool used by all. Key research findings. Industry does not have one tool or database that is used throughout the construction sector to calculate embodied carbon. Collaboration and transparency over data sharing throughout the sector is poor, and reducing embodied carbon is key at design stage. This study has shown that industry must improve its efforts to calculate and reduce embodied carbon. Despite the publication of BS-EN 15978, there remains widespread lack of understanding throughout the UK industry on the importance of addressing embodied carbon. Despite a growing volume of guidance published by UK professional institutions for reducing embodied carbon, there is no comprehensive material database or one calculation tool used by all throughout the UK construction sector. This research also suggests that the professional bodies need to collaborate to create a robust national database as a central, respected source for all industry disciplines. A clear, agreed approach for calculating embodied carbon is also needed to reduce the variations and discrepancies in the calculations which hamper an honest appraisal of projects' carbon performance and enable comparison between projects. It is clear that policy guidance is also needed. Government should set targets for embodied carbon and policies encouraging circular economy principles at a building level should be incorporated into legislation. Changes are needed to the building regulations to include stipulations to reduce embodied carbon and to require a whole life approach to carbon, with the priority on using materials with low embodied carbon. This can be done by establishing a consistent methodology for calculating embodied carbon, which allows comparison between projects. The study also concludes that awareness and skills within the industry need upgraded. Designers must learn to prioritise reuse and refurbishment in all projects before considering new build. EPDs must become standard for all construction materials. Designers must become experienced with whole life carbon reduction approaches and learn to account for embodied carbon as well as operational carbon in order to understand where the largest savings can be achieved. Designers and contractors need to favour materials like low carbon concrete over more carbon intense products. Clients must be encouraged to design and construct low embodied carbon projects and to take low carbon capability into account when selecting the design team. Targets should be set and reviewed frequently between the client and design team and main contractors. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Danielle. And we're happy to take questions in the chat, or we're happy to actually allow people to come in and contribute. I see Mahid is typing as we speak. And that was a really, really good presentation, and building on your piece of research in terms of, the work that you've done. And I see Chris Gorse has a question. You're going to ask the question, Chris, or will I read it out?
Yeah, no, happy to ask it. I was just, I think it's a great presentation, and quite a lot of people have starting to come into us asking us how we measure embodied carbon, and I suppose the challenge is, there's some production and processes that are sticking very traditionally to the way they've always developed products and manufactured them, and they're carbon intense products. But then there's others that are actually changing their mix of energy to produce carbon projects, and also changing their delivery strategies, which means that their carbon intensity reduces. And I feel that there's still a challenge, and it's still useful to measure almost the energy production as well as get a feel for how carbon intensive products are. And I think this is going to be a very difficult area to navigate in the future as products change. And maybe we're just looking for those. We're really looking for those that are more carbon intensive and those that are less carbon intensive. And then further on, we're looking at those that use less energy regardless of source. But I'm interested to just hear thoughts on this, really.
Yeah, I suppose, Chris, that was something that I had looked at as part of the research as well. And, looking at, I, done quite a bit of research on materials too, and timber and glulam and CLT are all materials now that are all, becoming more, sustainable products, less embodied carbon content. But, what you've touched on there too about the embedded energy, looking at the transport to be able to get that timber to the UK, all your transport carbon emissions in relation to that. So I kind of think embodied carbon and embedded energy, it almost needs to go hand in hand together.
Yeah, I mean, it was something. A colleague who only recently died, and he was really keen on looking at thermodynamics, and because that doesn't really change. So which is embodied energy really, and we obviously shouldn't ease off the gas, so to speak. We're looking at carbon intensive areas, but we equally we shouldn't let people just use huge amounts of renewable energy. But I think it's a really interesting topic. But yeah, sorry, I'll let other people speak. Sorry, Lloyd.
No, it's okay, Chris. It is a really interesting topic and an important topic, and that kind of debate around how we actually capture it in terms of what is actually happening in terms of embodied carbon, but also in terms of what it is we can do and what ways we can strive towards producing it is a really, really important conversation, and one that I think certainly stakeholders involved in the construction sector are really trying to get their heads around, because they haven't been put under pressure in terms of what it is they do in terms of design, which leads me into the question that Mahid has: how can the carbon emissions be reduced during the design stage? What is it? That's his question, Danielle.
Yeah, I can see Stephen's commented there on it too. Obviously it goes down to, a lot of the materials that are specified, but I suppose one of the things that I touched on as part of the research was prioritizing reuse, before rebuild, and I think that was part of the study that was identified too. There's a lot of carbon a lot of embodied carbon that is part of the main structural element. But if you maintain that main structural element, you're automatically offsetting quite a lot of carbon from the beginning, rather than doing a complete new build. But I think Stephen's touched on it there too. It's all to do with a lot of the materials that you specify too. There's a lot of like GGBS concrete now, with the ground blast furnace in it. So I think it comes down to a lot. The designers and the consultant team can really shape that design, and a lot of the design consultants now are very focused on that.
Yeah, and the whole notion of designing in, areas for where you use aerated concrete more, or certainly the products that you can actually use now that can be a substitute to the cement-based types of mix are absolutely huge. And I think also for me, You know, I think there's an element of education in required in terms of actually make sure that those who are designing are actually upskilled enough to understand the complexities of around designing in, you know, elements like wood or timber, or designing out steel and concrete. You know, there's a huge lesson to be actually administered there for people in terms of that, you know.
Completely, Lloyd, and it was quite interesting at the interview stage. You know, I used a couple of case study projects as well, but it was quite interesting when speaking to some of the team who weren't familiar, you know, even with the terminology embodied carbon and what that meant to them, and then also talking to the varying consultants, you know, and identifying there, you know, through both the interviews and the literature, that, you know, there isn't one tool that everyone that throughout the industry is using, and there's not one tool. So even being able to do, you know, comparisons between projects, you can't really do that because there isn't that one tool or that agreed method and tool to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, one of the things I would advocate always is go back to principles approaches, in terms of, if we are trying to have a more sustainable approach, well, in the design process, we have to build in the discussion around, well, what is the most sustainable approach in terms of, be it materiality or be it actually process, you know. So there's huge element of, in terms of collaboration, which seems to be a theme of the conference this year. You know, how do you build into that, you know, the necessity for discussion and engagement. The reuse project there, Chris has mentioned to it, and Leentje is talking there about actually educational programs and lifelong learning trajectories, and I completely agree with you in relation to that. Just scrolling down, is there any other questions?
There's just this general discussion about whether it's the client led or
Yeah.
which I think, you know, the leadership, I think, is also always important. It has to come from the client. But I think Stephen might have been in the presentation I was in the other day, where there was some good relationship discussions. And I think some parties in the supply chain can create better relationships with clients, getting future business by offering ways of having circular sort of economy-based things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe Danielle has got some comments on that. Is that push or pull, you know, which has been raised in other sections?
Yeah, I think, Chris, you know, I find that from working in the construction industry and working for, you know, a principal contractor, you know, you will get clients that, you know, who are developers and building a lot of buildings, but you also get clients who are just doing one-off buildings. And, you know, I almost feel as an industry, you know, it's almost our, you know, part and parcel, our responsibility to educate our clients, and, you know, the design team too. That's one thing that was identified, that Lloyd had touched on, just kind of a lack of training and understanding, you know, and getting everyone, you know, conversive on embodied carbon and what that means. I think, you know, it relates back to the beginning of a project. If the client is, you know, sustainability aware, carbon aware, you know, even looking at the benefits from a commercial benefit to them, you know, on the operational carbon side, it starts with the client, but I think the design consultant team have a major part to play in that.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you, Danielle. You know, and it's that conversation around, you know, what is the right thing to do, you know, and bringing in that expertise that's required for someone to contribute to a project that will actually lead it towards a more sustainable approach, or a more, you know, circular approach, or whatever is the necessity, you know. You know, I know the Architectural Society in London last year had this motto of, you know, the most sustainable building is the building that's currently built. rather than knocking it down and actually reconstructing, you know. And I think there's a whole lot to be said for that in terms of reuse and you know, upcycling and the like. We certainly have a long way to go in relation to that, but certainly education is part of it, but also, you know, clients link towards their contribution, you know, to being more sustainable and having buildings that actually contribute better would be partly a way to go. Okay, I noticed we're coming up to the end. I don't see any more questions.
Oscar was typing away there. I wonder if you can give him a last comment.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Oscar. Yeah,
he keeps. Maybe just make him live because he keeps on popping up there. If he could talk,
Oscar, would you like to contribute?
I mean, I think this is a really interesting debate.
Oh, educating the banks as well, not granting loans. Yeah. Okay. Excellent comments, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and again, it's all stakeholders, you know, and I suppose, you know, as I mentioned, collaboration is an important aspect. Oscar, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I don't know if you hear me or not. Or...
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is a very interesting topic, and I would like to thank you for the presentation because it's, I don't know, I started a discussion with my supervisor about this because we are looking at sustainable real estate, how to utilize existing building stock. And I've been attending other conference, and then I've been looking at attacking the banks, like start from the top and like not granting the loans to the users, like have some kind of plan for greenhouse gas emissions. Maybe that's the way to go, because I mean, once the client got the loan and the money, they want to build for us little money as possible, and then your hand is kind of tied to what the client wants as well. So. Yeah, it was just a thought.
No, it's a really good thought, Oscar. I think, you know, and again, all stakeholders, and that includes the banks in terms of the lending agencies, you know, and the requirements. And for me, it shouldn't be just piecemeal in terms of that a building is built to a particular standard, whether it be LEED, BREEAM, or Living Building Challenge or whatever. It should be actually more than that. Yeah. It should actually come from, you know, a principled approach in terms of trying to actually, you know, ameliorate that you know, and go in the right direction in terms of its contribution to actually slowing down climate change and having buildings of quality, but buildings that are less impactful on the environment. Yeah. You know, so really good contribution there. I did see there were a couple of people still. Typing away.
I think I did. I was just adding a comment there, Lloyd.
Okay.
I just think there's so much to understand with, you know, who's responsible, how can we drive responsibility, how can we create value. And I do think the measurement of carbon is distracting us. From you know, like it's easy to say a concrete product can be more sustainable, and then I want to know, you know, how much energy is it, what's the life, what's the almost a regulated life, because it's almost irrelevant if we think it can last 100 years, and we know it can. But if we can only get a performance that will allow it to be used for 25 because of carbonation or other products, then we enter a whole world of problems. And I'm involved in some research and testing at the moment. There's you think that the structures are certainly strong and have more life, but you dare not guarantee it in case it fails. So, and the cost of actually retesting those structures to give them an extended life is not easy or cheap.
Yeah, absolutely, and time consuming.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you know, complexity comes into mind in terms of the buildings that we actually, you know, have in terms of the stock that's there, but also in terms of what it is we want to build into the future, you know. And certainly that, you know, it's no easy job nowadays trying to actually design and be compliant, but also actually make that contribution to reducing the footprint that the building has.
I also think, unfortunately, some of the big clients that we might not like McDonald's and Travel-ins, probably have more circular potential because they're buying modules that they could reuse or ship to a different pace.
Yeah.
If the market didn't work in one area, and your supply, your customer supply wasn't there, then you could move your product. And I do see some of those units being easier to disassemble and maybe change the facades and keep the internal structure. I don't know. But I don't particularly like to offer that model as the one that we should uphold, but it just springs to mind.
It does spring to mind, yeah. Okay, it's 10 to 4. It's been a really, really great session. I'd like to thank our 3 presenters. Thank you all very much. It has generated some lively discussion and discourse. So well done to everybody. And I look forward to seeing you all in the plenary session in 10 minutes or so.